Hey, hi, hello. It's been far too long since I've made a video. I really gotta stop reading Dr. Seuss in my free time. Hey everybody, it's Nick. I have started running a new D&D campaign and I tried something out that's a little bit different that I've heard people do in various places, various stories that they've talked about, and I wanted to give it a try, and I've got some tips, I have some experience, I want to share that experience with you. So basically the idea is taking your players through their backstories, actually role-playing out their backstories, getting them hooked into the campaign, sort of then leaving home, doing a bit of adventuring one-on-one before they actually meet the party. So there's, I think, a lot of really cool upsides, pros to doing this. There's some pitfalls to maybe avoid, and I want to share those with you guys so that if you want to try this, you feel like you can, and you have a bit more information and ability to give it a shot. And you'll notice that I didn't say pros and cons, because I don't really think there are cons. I mentioned pitfalls because there are some things that maybe you want to avoid or ways that you want to navigate it specifically, but I don't think there's downsides. I don't think there's bad aspects to this. And so, I've always enjoyed running D&D for just one player. It's always a lot of fun. The player loves it. I love it. It's big fun. So let's jump into it. What are some of the advantages, some of the pros for doing this? Well, first of all, your player gets a chance to learn their character, to meet their own PC without the context of the bigger group. If they want to, they can experiment a little bit with an accent or a personality trait that maybe they're not sure how is actually going to play out at the table. Have you ever played a character and had a specific voice in mind or a mannerism or something, and then you sit down to the table and you try it out, and in 5 minutes you realize this is terrible and it's not going to work, but you feel sort of trapped in it because everyone has met this character as this thing, and now you're sort of locked in. Well, if you run D&D with just the DM and this player, they don't have that trapped feeling. They can change stuff. They can adapt things. They could try a different voice out. They could try a different mannerism out. Be more shy, be more meek, be more confident. They can learn their character and maybe adjust on the fly because it's just the DM that they've met. They get a chance to sort of workshop their character at actual play rather than just in their head for a couple of weeks. It also gives you the chance, the DM, to meet the player. It gives you a chance to, in a one-on-one, very specific and focused setting, a chance to meet this character. If you played for, let's say 5 hours over a course of a couple sessions with just one player, that is 5 unadulterated hours of just that character that you're getting to meet. It would take, maybe 20 or 30 hours of a normal play because of how many players there are at the table, and you divide that attention up and all this stuff. The player is not always in the spotlight. It would take many, many more sessions for you to get that level of familiar with a specific character. And so it gives you, the DM, a chance to get a really concentrated dose of who this character is. You learn their strengths, their weaknesses, both as a person and, in combat. You also learn what their motivations might be. What are they interested in? How can you hook them with quests in the future? I have found those things to be invaluable as a DM, to really get that specific, focused quality time, so to speak, with this character and this player to get a better feel for them as a character at the table. Additionally, it gives players a chance to meet the world on their terms. They get to meet their own NPCs and factions and groups and maybe fight some different monsters, interact with the central tension or the story in their own way, kind of unique to their character outside of the context of the rest of the group. So they have their own sort of grounded experience in your world. This gives them so much more agency and the ability to form sort of personal goals if that's something that you and your characters are interested in. The ability to have downtime goals and things that they want to do. This is a huge opportunity for that. One thing that I specifically tried to do is I had different blanks for all of my players to fill in. I wanted all of my players to have an ally that they had met, have an enemy that they had interacted with, been to a place that nobody else had been to, have a hook into the main quest that nobody else had, have an insight or experience with the central tension of my campaign. I also wanted to give them a chance to make a moral decision, have a moral quandary of some sort, or even just interact with a decision and make a choice so that that their character's morality could be put on display. I wanted to have all of these different elements in so my players sort of got to experience different little things as they were going through their solo adventure. It gives the player unique information that you didn't just give them in a handout that they read, the day before the first session. They actually heard this information. They met this NPC. They have been to this town. They have this experience of getting to have played through these things. So if and when the group as a whole travels to this one town, the player can go, actually, wait a second, I've been here. I have stayed in the Rusty Spoon Tavern. I know the innkeep. I have all this information about this town already, and it's not just something you handed the player. They remember. They were there. From a practical level, it sort of lets you accelerate through some of the early levels a bit if you want to. I don't personally love levels 1 through 3. So I start a lot of my games at 3rd level, sometimes 5th level, and this gives me the chance to rapidly push through those first couple levels. I did, for these one-on-ones, I did 2 sessions each with my players, and they went for probably a total of 4 or 5 hours over the course of those 2 sessions, and each session I gave them a level. And so first session went from level 1 to level 2 to level 3. And then we were done. And we're going to slow that pace down quite a bit, but it lets them have a chance to experience being very weak and growing in power. But also you kind of accelerate through those incredibly lethal and very early levels. The other thing to keep in mind is that it is okay, kind of actually required a little bit, to railroad in these one-on-one sessions, because the group knows that they are trying to move towards forming a party as a whole, as a group. They know that's the objective. So it's not that big a deal to sort of corral them in that direction. They want to be navigated. Nobody thinks that they're just going to have this entire adventure with just their character for years and tons of sessions with just you. They know that in a session or 2, they're going to meet up with the rest of the party, and so they know they've got a place to go and things to do, and so they're okay being shepherded a little bit. Railroaded is maybe a kind of a negative term. Shepherded, I think, is a really good term in this context. So those are a lot of the really high-level benefits that I have experienced in getting to run one-on-one D&D with a player. It's always a lot of fun. The player always enjoys it. I always enjoy it. But those are some really specific and practical benefits that you can get out of this process of running one-on-one through your backstory. So that call to adventure, that hook into the main campaign as your players sort of get out into the open world. That being said, there are some pitfalls that I want to talk about here. There are some things that, if not avoided, can definitely throw a wrench in things. Don't worry, I have done this several times. I can help you avoid the pitfalls. I have advice for all of them, so let's jump into it. First and most obvious, combat is super dangerous, especially if you're starting at very low levels. A level 1 PC by themselves, it's really dangerous. It's really lethal. You're chilling at a cool 9 hit points, trying your best to avoid death at every turn. Action economy matters hugely here. So if you throw your PC against 3 enemies, even very low level enemies, it might be dangerous because those NPCs are getting 3 different attacks. The PC only has 1. So be very careful with the action economy. One thing that you can do to help mitigate this is to give an ally of some sort, a traveling companion, a guide, something that the players can meet this NPC and they're a cool, flavorful NPC. Maybe they have some some help, some advice. Maybe they're a little bit stronger than the player, but they also have the ability to be present during combat and help the player out. You don't want this NPC to steal the show or anything, but just make sure that if your player for some reason can't roll above a 10, that they don't instantly die with their brand new character just because sometimes dice happen. It's also worth noting what classes your characters are playing. I had a barbarian in one of my one-on-ones. Gave this person a lot of combat. They were well suited for it, and they did incredibly well in their combats for the most part. And I also have a bard as one of the players. I didn't give them almost any combat, and definitely they were not a combat-oriented character. So it gives you a chance to custom tailor some of the challenges that your players will overcome based on their classes and their characters and who they are. Another pitfall to avoid is the lingering quest. I made sure to give all of my players a quest, a goal, an objective as part of their sort of side solo adventure so that they could, have a sense of accomplishment. I've got a thing to do, a mission. I'm not just dallying around in the world waiting for adventure to find me. I'm going and I'm being active. One thing to avoid is if you maybe give them this quest, make sure that it ends or wraps up around or just after when they're going to meet the party. Because if you give them this quest that's further out, that's a little longer, they are going to doggedly pursue that quest regardless of forming the party. They're going to say, no, I can't join up with you guys and do whatever you're doing. I have to go do this thing because it was an urgent mission that was given to me personally. I almost made that mistake, but managed to tweak it at the last minute and move some things around without the player knowing so that I could wrap things up on time and make sure the players got to form as a party. So these last pitfalls are just some logistical realities, but players one-on-one, if you have never run a one-on-one session, you might not know this, but they chew through content much faster. They're able to make decisions much more quickly. There's no debate and discussion time. And even if there's an NPC to discuss something with, it's just one or two, and the players usually are headstrong and have an idea and they go for it. So in my experience, if your typical amount of notes, prep, planning, encounters, combats, various NPCs that they're going to meet, and you are experienced as a DM and this is going to take roughly 4 hours, a normal session's length of time for my group. In my experience, that amount of planning, one session for a group, translates to about an hour and a half. Obviously, it depends greatly based on your character, how much they engage with various things, how much they want to role play and talk versus, get things done. But in general, I have found that 4 hours for a group condenses down to about 1.5 hours for a player. Which, by the way, it's fine to have shorter sessions. Having a 4-hour session with just one player can be really daunting because the player has to be on for that entire time. They are engaged, they're being talked to. You as a DM know how exhausting it can be to be locked in for 4 hours. Well, the player's not used to that. They are going to be very drained from a long session. So I wouldn't run more than 2.5 hours at the most. That can be very fatiguing for a player, and there's a lot happening and getting done. You don't want to skip over things accidentally because you were, trying to get all of it done in one sitting. Break it up. Have a couple different smaller sessions. It's no big deal to do that. It also takes longer. It delays the start of your game. If you are doing this, it means that, you're already sort of pretty much ready and prepared for the campaign to start. And instead of, all right, we're all a group formed here as a party, let's get started, you're saying, wait, no, we're not going to do that. I'm going to take time to meet with you individually. And so sometimes you could push the campaign off for several weeks, maybe even a couple months before you're ready to do it. So it's just a question of, do you want to have that experience of getting to role play this backstory out and one-on-one with these characters at the cost of starting your game later? Or do you want to just jump into it and let's all be together and get started right away? I don't know that there's a right answer, which one is better. I just think it's worth letting you know the reality of that situation. And finally, a pitfall to think about, or a danger, is it takes a lot of planning and prep. 3 different unique storylines is what I had to come up with. I had 3 players and I came up with 3 unique storylines, quest ideas, NPCs for them to meet, places for them to go, conversations that they were going to have, hooks into the main story, all 3 getting different ones, of the different combinations, meeting different people. It was a lot. And that was with only 3 players. It takes a lot of planning and time and effort. It's kind of difficult. If I'm being honest, I tried this with just 3 players, and looking back on it, I think that the most I would do is 4. That no more. I'm used to running for 5, 6, sometimes 7 players. I would never do this with a group of 7. The only caveat being, if you could do several different groups of 2, maybe pairings here and there, you just you role play them meeting and then you get started with the solo stuff. Because doing, 5 or 6 different one-on-one adventures to all get to the same place without conflicts and, lining up things just right, it just seems like a nightmare to me. If you can do that, more power to you. but I would try to do maybe groups of 2s or 3s if I had a larger party, so that they could have that feeling of like a smaller group coming together, but it would be less work as a DM to try to navigate those all together. I think that's what Critical Role did in this second campaign, is they had clusters of players that met each other because they had like so many players. So those are some of my pros and pitfalls for running solo adventures before the campaign has even started. One-on-one D&D to play through your characters' backstories. It's a very cool experience. I recommend you do it. I encourage you to give it a shot, maybe in the start of your next campaign, maybe some downtime. If you haven't ever run any one-on-one sessions, I recommend you do it. I've done it, I don't know, I've probably had 10 or 12 sessions now where I have run one-on-one for another player, and it's always a blast. I've never not enjoyed it. The player feels the same. It's always a really good time. I recommend it. So these are some of my advice and tips and experiences that I have had. If you have experience with this or ideas, things that I've missed, questions that you have about how this would work, the comment section is a great place to go. I am very active. I try to read every comment and respond when I can. I appreciate all the engagement. It's really fun. It's sort of the reason why I'm doing this. I'm not out for millions of views. I'm not trying to make this a side hobby or anything. I just think it's a fun little thing to do. I've got some experiences as a DM, and I want to share them with you so that you can help. I can help you run a better game. So if it seems like this is engaging and interesting, I will go ahead and leave the notes that I had for these one-on-one sessions in the description. If that's something people are interested in, feel like they would get a kick out of, I'm going to do that. Disclaimer to any of my players who are still watching, that document is off limits for you. It will spoil it for you. It will ruin it for you. You won't have a good time. Don't open it. But for everybody else, hopefully the notes will be an interesting little insight into sort of, one, how I form notes. It might not be useful to you at all, but two, sort of some of the challenges and things that I was trying to accomplish as my players were going through this process. So hopefully this information has been informative, useful, challenging. If it's something that you have never considered doing, I hope that you have some more tools and abilities to give it a shot if it's something that you are interested in. No idea what the next video will be, but probably it'll be from stuff that I have learned while running, taking those lessons and turning them into ideas and things for you to steal or learn from my mistakes or some of my occasional successes. But anyways, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.